So good morning once again to all the lovely audience today. Today, MIT Art, Design and Technology University Pune takes immense pleasure and pride to host Padma Shri A.S. Kiran Kumar sir, former chairman, Indian Space Research Organization, for the impact webinar on space frontier opportunities in aerospace engineering. Today, we are going to explore the exciting opportunities available in space technology and how one can contribute to the growth of the nation being an engineer post COVID-19 era. Today, we do have with us Shri A.S. Kiran Kumar sir, who is also one of our mentor and guide, and he's a part of our MIT Edit University family. Also, we do have with us Professor Dr. Kishore Rawande sir, Principal MIT School of Engineering, Dean Research and Consultancy Cell, and Professor Dr. Sunil Dingre, Head Department of Aerospace Engineering. So I would like to request Professor Dr. Kishore Rawande sir to deliver the welcome address. Over to you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Suraj. Good morning, A.S. Kiran Kumar sir, and good morning all participants and my colleagues. I am indeed delighted to welcome our esteemed expert speaker, Shri A.S. Kiran Kumar sir, former chairman, for this prestigious webinar on fascinating area of Odyssey, the ocean of opportunities. I would like to convey to you, sir, our Honorable Executive President, Dr. Mangesh sir, desires to communicate his warm greetings to you. He could not make it to this webinar and couldn't join us, for he has some other pressing engagements at his home. So he has conveyed his greetings to you, sir, and he has also welcomed to this webinar.
Thank you.
Sir, ever since you visited the School of Engineering and Aerospace Engineering Department a few years ago, in fact, I am very happy to mention as the principal of this college that our students really felt so blessed and inspired by your presence on that particular day. And in fact, I must say that from that onwards, they started, in fact, doing extraordinarily well and has been taking keen interest in all the studies that they are doing, especially in aerospace engineering. Further, it's my pleasure to welcome all the participants and my colleagues for this particular webinar, wherein we would have a journey from 500 kilometers below Earth to 225 million kilometers of Indian Space Research Organization, which brought India to the forefront global level, in fact, under your able leadership. Today, we will know about, from our expert, the fascinating journey of Indian Space Research Organization, its contribution in the past, and the future aspects and opportunities for the engineers from all disciplines of space mission and research. For hundreds of years, human beings have wondered about what is going on in space. In fact, earlier, knew that astronomers have searched for new celestial bodies and to understand what created the universe. We also know that thousands of poems written on moon, right from for the small kids to the elders, and even prayers have been offered to the moon, part of our religious activity. Lunar actors govern most of our lives. Unidentifying flying objects, intergraphic movies and cartoons and everything to do with space has always fascinated us. We also know that when Neil Armstrong landed on the moon first time in 1969, did the modern man's interest in space really got elated. His famous line, "One small step for man and one giant step for mankind," would probably be the most remembered quote in the world relating to space. Our Honorable Prime Minister Narendra Modi ji made the announcement of Mission Shakti on 27th March 2019 about the successful test of ASAT that put India in the select club of 4 with United States, Russia, and China. This was indeed a giant step for India in protecting our rights and our borders in space. This should make right-thinking Indian proud, and in fact, we all are proud of you, sir, that you have led the Indian Space Research Organization right from 2000 15 to 18. I would be surprised if Indians who do not want best possible security or who do not see India the rightful place in this world as the superpower. We are all proud that today our expert, Sri A.S. Kiran Kumar sir, will enlighten us with some of the topics like Indian interplanetary mission. In fact, he must be having his own agenda of speech, but maybe he would cover some of these areas which I am just trying to mention: space science experiments, reaching different orbits, indigenous satellites, Chandrayaan, complexities of space warfare, Indian military application satellites, and so on. I know this entire thing would take a huge amount of time, but I am sure he would really bring us an enlightening and a thought-provoking and informative presentation for all our experts all our participants who have joined this webinar. I once again thank you, sir, for sparing your valuable time this morning and being with us. In fact, we have already now on board about 200 participants, and I'm sure all of them are fortunate to hear Dr. A.S. Kiran Kumar, sir. I once again welcome you, sir, and I request you to make your presentation. But before that, I would request Dr. Dingre or overseer Suraj Goyal, who would take on the further proceedings of this webinar. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you so much for setting the tone. Now, I would like to request Professor Dr. Sunil Dingre, sir, Head Department of Aerospace Engineering, to introduce A.S. Kiran Kumar, sir.
Thank you, Professor Suraj. Thank you, Ravande, sir. I am very happy to introduce our distinguished speaker, Padma Shri A.S. Kiran Kumar, sir. Shri A.S. Kiran Kumar is Vikram Sarabhai Professor at the Indian Space Research Organization, Bangalore. He is member of Space Commission, Government of India, and member, Governing Council, Indian Institute of Science, Bangalore. During 2015 to 2018, he has served as Secretary, Department of Space and Chairman, Indian Space Research Organization. Shri Kiran Kumar sir was born on October 22, 1952 in Hassan, Karnataka. He obtained his physics honors degree from National College, Bangalore in 1971, MSc Physics in Electronics from Bangalore University in 1973, and MTech degree in Physical Engineering from Indian Institute of Science, Bangalore in 1975. He has steered the implementation of the applications-oriented Indian space program, which has facilitated rapid development of the country in many important spheres of Earth observation, communication, navigation, meteorology, and space science, as well as the development of indigenous launch vehicles and related technologies for providing assured access to space. He has contributed to the design and development of more than 50 electro-optical imaging sensors flown on space-borne platforms, starting from Bhaskara TV payload in 1979 to the payloads on board the Mars Orbiter mission in 2013. He has played a crucial role in Chandrayaan-1 mission right from the conceptualization stage and has made exemplary contributions to the success of Mars Orbiter mission and reusable launch vehicle technology demonstrator, that is RLV. Shri Kiran Kumar sir has been the chair of Commission on Earth Observation Satellites in 2012. He has made valuable contributions to the coordination group of meteorological satellites, expert team on satellite systems, World Meteorological Organization, and Indo-US Joint Working Group on Civil Space Cooperation. Shri Kiran Kumar sir is President, Aeronautical Society of India and Fellow of Indian National Academy of Engineering, National Academy of Sciences India, Indian Society of Remote Sensing, Institution of Electronics and Telecommunication Engineers, Indian Society of Systems for Science and Engineering, Indian Meteorological Society, Indian Society of Geomatics, Gujarat Science Academy, Andhra Pradesh Academy of Sciences, and an elected member of International Academy of Astronautics. Now about awards and recognitions. He has been conferred with honoris causa and DSc by 18 Indian academic institutions. He has co-authored 85 publications in various national, international scientific journals, conferences, and symposiums. In recognition of his contribution, he was conferred Padma Shri Award by the President of India in 2014. The government of Karnataka honored him with Rajyotsav Award for the year 2015 for his contribution to space, science and technology. Sir M. Vishweshwaraya Senior Scientist State Award for year 2013 and Lifetime Achievement Award from Karnataka Science and Technology Academic in 2016. He is recipient of IISc Distinguished Alumnus Award for the year 2015, Gujarat Ratna Life for Innovation Award conferred by Gujarat Innovation Science Society in 2014 and Lifetime Achievement Award by Andhra Pradesh Academy of Sciences in 2016. Bharat Ratna M. Vishweshwaraya Century Award for Innovation in Technology conferred by University of Mysore in 2016. GM Modi Science Award by Gujar Mal Modi Science Foundation in 2016. 19 SIES Chandrasekhar Saraswati National Eminence Award in 2016. HK Firodia Vignan Ratna Award by HK Firodia Foundation in 2017 and Santokh Award instituted by SRKKF Surat in 2018. So I am reading few of these, not all. Shri Kiran Kumar sir has been confirmed with the prestigious 2018 International von Karman Wings Award instituted by the Aerospace Historical Society in collaboration with the Graduate Aerospace Laboratories at the California Institute of Technology on November 8, 2018 and the Chevalier de l'Ordre National de Legion, the honor that is the highest civilian honor by government of France on May 2, 2019. So I welcome you, sir, and thank you very much for joining this webinar. Over to you, Kiran Kumar, sir. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dingreji. Thank you very much, Kishore. And also all the participants of this webinar program organized by MIT Art and Design Pune. It's indeed a great opportunity to interact with you and talk to you about space, which is considered as the fourth frontier or final frontier. Probably all of you are quite aware that the space age started with the first artificial satellite being put into orbit by the Russians back in 1957 on the 4th of October. And then Russians went ahead and put their first man into orbit. Then Americans went ahead and landed on moon. And today, if you look at space as a opportunity or space, what all is being done: communication, Earth observation, space exploration, navigation, and it's also being used for strategic purposes. And you have space stations. Just the other day, you saw one of the enterprises, a private company in US, SpaceX, carrying the astronauts to the space station in America. And then we are going to talk something about space tourism and also if you look at the fourth frontier, when it is said, or the final frontier, we are all quite aware that man started conquering land, then he built ships and then vessels, and then started conquering ocean. And also once the airspace with the availability of aircraft, and then today you have these three frontiers, fully commercial, and then human beings have conquered these spaces. And today, one of the key things that is happening is space itself. And if you look at space beyond the Earth, you have the troposphere, stratosphere, mesosphere, then what is called as the Kármán line. And beyond that, you have the complete vast universe. And this is considered as the fourth frontier or the final frontier for the human beings to explore and conquer. And then today, by virtue of the various technological capabilities that have been established, what has been done is using objects going around Earth in space, remote sensing, that is looking at Earth from space, communication, where you are trying to link, interconnect people on Earth by using instruments carried on the spacecraft, and then both low Earth orbiting satellites and geostationary satellites, using them, connecting the entire thing. In fact, today, if we are able to reach out to all of you sitting at our homes or sitting at our offices, it is because of the tremendous communication capability that has been brought in by communication system. And then navigation is again a very innovative application which originally started with for strategic application, where by having a small receiver in your hand, you could locate yourself accurately by doing triangulation with a set of satellites whose position is very accurately known, and these satellites transmit the signal and the receiver makes use of it. Today, every one of us make use of this navigation capability of the satellite, whether it is in our mobile or any of these devices, whether it's a laptop or palm top. All these devices today make use of the navigation capability brought in by the space activities. And space now also provides opportunity for tourism, travel, adventure, exploration, and exploitation, each of which we will see in some detail in subsequent slides. Now, if you look at what is space adventure, people are curious just to experience near zero gravity, where hyperbolic trajectory planes or specific gadgets are used to provide for few tens of seconds experience for people to look at how zero gravity feels. And today you're also familiar that some companies have started looking at how they can take people from Earth to planets or planetary bodies. And you would also have heard of, for example, one-way tickets being sold to Mars, etc. Then space adventure, space exploration. Now, exploration is another aspect human beings have all the time been doing right from the initial days. What is there in this universe? How big is this universe? And whether we can understand this entire universe. For this, one requires the ability to explore. And for doing this exploration, not only using remote gadgets, whether it is telescope, operating different frequencies, different wavelengths, but also reaching out to space through special vehicles and making other planets or habitable places and then going beyond. And then exploitation is like in the earlier era when the gold was discovered in some places, you would have heard of Mackina's gold type of activity. Today, exploitation of the objects in space, whether it is asteroids or others, is one of the things which is being looked at. Now, if you look at how the space activities have progressed, the growth of spacefaring nations and spacefaring communities across the globe, if you see in the early 60s, there were only few advanced countries which had the ability to reach out to space. But today, more than 40 plus countries are in some ways interacting and then working in the areas of space. And this is progressively increasing as the space activities become more and more interesting and more cost effective. and this is progressively growing. And this particular slide shows you how, for example, today a large number of countries are involved in space programs. More than about 40 nations are engaged on full-fledged space activities, and more than 100 nations are utilizing the space systems and services. Space for national development in particular and benefit the entire humanity in general on the basis of freedom of exploration, freedom of access to and use of outer space, freedom from threat to space systems and infrastructure. In fact, United Nations has actually pledged that the entire space is common heritage of humanity. And then if you look at space economy, today it is said space economy is about $360+ billion. And this involves launch vehicles, satellites, the ground systems required for both launch vehicle operation, satellite operation, and also the ground systems required for that. And more than that, the services generated based on these space systems, whether it is direct to home television or the stock exchange activities which happen through that, or connectivity and navigation, remote sensing for strategic application. All of this is a huge market, and this is why today the India and the government of India is also trying to look at how we can take advantage of what technological capability the country has built over last 4 to 5 decades, and how we can become a part of this global economy and improve India's ability to take part in that and also increase the share of India in this economy. As a result of that, India gaining both in terms of economics and also in terms of potential job opportunities for people. See, if you look at how things happened in India itself, the India started its program just within about 6 years of the launching first object into space, Sputnik. And within the first 6 years, it was Dr. Vikram Sarabhai who had the foresight and vision to bring in sounding rockets in the form of kits. And the first rocket launch took place in Tumba Equatorial Rocket Launching Site way back in 1963 on the 23rd of November. Then India conducted one of the very first and the largest socio-technological experiment, an experiment of beaming signal from the satellite, a geostationary satellite, and then showcasing to the world that you can make use of the broadcasting capability from a tower at 36,000 kilometers, and we can reach out to the remote people in our country and bring to them the information revolution, and also tell the farmers and the villagers how the farming practices can be improved, how the general welfare of the villagers, health practices can be improved by bringing in this capability. What was done was very unique. Equivalent of today's direct to home television sets were systems were realized at that time, way back in 75, and it demonstrated how space technology is beneficial for the country. And starting from that, today we have more than 189 missions completed, 75 launch vehicles. We have about 3 versions of the launch vehicles. That is a polar satellite launch vehicle. Then we have got the geostationary satellite launch vehicle of 2 categories. And then more than 100+ satellites have been launched through our own launch vehicles. Not only that, we have also done more than 320+ satellites of 33 countries we have been launched, while we have built the capability of these launch vehicles, which can take our satellites to near Earth orbits and also geostationary orbits and even beyond for Moon and Mars. While all this technological capability is being developed, we are also trying to work on the research and development, wherein that our ability to reduce the cost of access to space and also put humans into space and build increased capabilities in the launch vehicle system is in progress. One of the very first applications, and an application which made a huge impact for the country is when Dr. Sarabhai was to conduct the first experiment, he had to convince the fishermen in Tumba Equatorial Rocket Launching Site. And through the help of a priest there, he could convince the fishermen that if you vacate this place and give us an opportunity to conduct these space experiments, one day in future, the country will benefit. Just as though to demonstrate this, from 1999 onwards, India was able to provide to the fishermen community in the country through pager and then electronic texting mechanisms which were available at that time, information about where to go for fishing in the ocean to the 7,500 long coastline we have and these fishermen. Today, the capability has been significantly enhanced by virtue of our navigation satellites. A small gadget fitted in the boat of the fisherman provides him not only specific information about where to go for fishing through a video app in the mobile, and also through the mobile in the mother tongue, it gives him alerts on any weather vagaries that could occur. If the weather conditions are going to be unbearable, he'll be alerted and he'll be warned. And also he'll be told if he's crossing international boundaries. And all this is happening with the set of satellite communication, navigation, as well as remote sensing satellites that have been built. And also you're familiar that in the recent past, super cyclones are being dealt with by the very accurate information about the cyclones. And today, India is among the few countries which have the capability to predict the landfall. And India Meteorological Department provides that information through the satellite data and the models that they are using. And disaster relief agencies are able to evacuate people and save the lives of people. And over a period of time, starting with INSAT series, today India has a large number of satellites providing communication, connecting different parts of the country. And this is a continuing process, and more capable satellites are being developed and launched. Today we have GSAT 11, and very soon you will have other satellites which will provide the Gram Panchayats ability to communicate with the main government agencies and others, and also provide connectivity to rural areas. And also navigation satellite by using Gagan program as well as the navigation satellite program, we are able to provide, like I said, to the fishermen for coastal security, and also for the entire country, or in fact, Indian subcontinent, where using these satellite data, gadgets fitted on the aircraft can tell them very accurately within few meters their position at the time they are in space. So en route planning and precision landing activities are facilitated by these signals. And in remote sensing, starting with a 1 kilometer resolution, we have reached sub-meter resolution capabilities. And then using this crop forecasting activity and also for various strategic application, the data is being utilized. And for doing this, we have been working on putting satellites into different orbits. As you are familiar, if you have a satellite in an equatorial plane, you can cover the same portion of the Earth on a continuous basis if you are in geostationary orbit. Otherwise, more frequent observations of a limited region is possible. And if you get into a polar orbit, you can cover the entire globe over a period of time. And using different satellites operating between these two orbits, you can do different functionalities. We have built satellites and launched them to Moon, to Mars, and also in future, we are looking at going to Venus and other planetary bodies also. And then this how progressively we have moved from low Earth orbit 500 to 900 kilometers to geostationary orbits at 36,000 kilometers, Moon at 3.85 lakhs, Mars at 225 million kilometers. And during this period, we have built a number of scientific instruments, whether it is AstroSat, which has provided to the country a unique capability of providing in the far ultraviolet one of the world's very high resolution, very high angular resolution telescopes, and also the space recovery capsule and modules which have been brought back to Earth from space. And then Mars operation, while the satellite was originally planned for 6 months, by this September, we will be almost completing 6 years in orbit. And this is also a very unique capability which has been established. And for this, starting from sounding rockets way back in 63, where these rockets were actually brought in kit form and assembled. Today, we have a host of PSLV, GSLV Mark II and III, a cryogenic engine which is totally indigenously developed, and then experiments carried out for spacecraft recovery modules, and also the capsules which came back, that care module. And then we are working on new cryogenic system and semi-cryo systems to enable future capabilities. Now, space itself, if you look at not only nationally, but internationally, people recognize that we need to cooperate with each other, and a large number of agencies, whether United Nations, Outer Space Entity, or Committee on Earth Observation Satellite, World Meteorological Organization, committees on the cooperation for geostationary meteorological satellites, and GEOS, all these work together and then make sure that we share the capabilities of the satellites and various instruments. We share data generated on that for the global community. For example, today India contributes by generating the ocean wind vector information, which goes into the atmospheric models for predicting weather across the globe. And we also work with other space agencies for providing common good information. Today, the satellites are increasing capability. What started as a few satellites in the earlier era, today thousands of satellites are operating in space, and more mega satellite constellations are being looked at for performance. I'll just touch upon few of those things in the coming slides. And today, globally, if you look at the global entities, space agencies are working together in cooperation to look at what can be done with the satellites operating in LEO, in the satellites going to moon and even to Mars, or exploration of space. In all these areas, how different agencies can cooperate and share the resources we have and work for a common good. And in a similar manner, the exploration, both the planetary exploration and also deep space explorations, if you look at, so you can easily imagine today the knowledge of the human being is considerably increased because you are able to go outside the Earth's atmosphere and look at space. And by virtue of this, you are able to collect signals in electromagnetic radiation operating in very different ranges. And by virtue of this, today telescopes are able to see deep into space and collect signals coming from billions of light years away and understand the cosmos, its expanse, and understanding of the universe itself. And in terms of mega constellation, people are looking at today, for example, you would have heard of Starlinks by SpaceX. See, as you can visualize, a geostationary satellite which can provide you opportunity to look at Earth on a continuous basis because of its distance from Earth, which is about 36,000 kilometers. The electromagnetic radiation takes almost 120 milliseconds to travel from that distance to ground. And if you take the two-way travel, it becomes 200 plus milliseconds, and then add other delays. Almost up to half a second delay is there in transaction. For many applications, this is considered too much of a latency. And today people are looking at low Earth orbiting satellite constellation to provide connectivity, whether it's internet connectivity. Today, the human beings are linked to each other over the entire globe because of these connectivities. And what is being attempted is by putting a large number of satellites into orbit and make them work in coordination and provide signals to people on Earth, any part of the globe, and through that provide internet connectivity for doing the internet access, and also all kinds of activities that are possible to be linked through these satellites. For example, Starlink is SpaceX's endeavor, where they are trying to look at bringing in almost 4,000, or today they are talking of even going up to 36,000 satellite constellation. OneWeb talked about 900 satellites, and of course, today they have also filed for bankruptcy. So many of these enterprises, they start, and then depending on how the activities go on, they make progress or they even shut down sometimes. But then Telesat, Boeing, today remote sensing, Planet Labs have 200 plus satellites. So many mega constellations are being looked at. As a result of this, what is also happening is there is a large number of objects in space which could hinder the further development in some time in the future. Though at this point of time, the space debris, what we call as objects which are non-functional or dysfunctional, which continue to operate in, continue to orbit in space, can result in hindrances. So gradually, this becomes another issue which needs to be tackled. Today, you also would have heard of what is called as a Kepler syndrome, where if there is a collision in space, then because of the collision, a large number of multiple objects get formed, and these in turn can become threats to operating satellites. Today, few of the things that are done by us is every day we do what is called as a collision probability analysis. Look at if there is any space object which is being tracked comes anywhere near these satellites, then you maneuver them to avoid any possible collision. And so progressively, this is another challenge to humanity to keep objects in space working fine. This is one of the examples of Starlink satellite, where a number of such satellites they have put into orbit, and now they are in the process of trying to find out how they can make use of these satellites for ensuring internet connectivity across the globe, and also how one activity affects another activity is exemplified because astronomers looking at space from ground complained that these set of satellites appear as celestial objects. They interfere in our ability to look at space, so we should take care. So SpaceX is trying to look at how they can minimize the impact of this. So traffic management becomes an issue. One of the European satellites had to dodge a potential collision with SpaceX Starlink orbit. And then re-entry of space junk is another issue. You would have read in the papers recently, one of the Chinese upper stage narrowly missed New York in the past month or so. And progressively, this also could become issues. That means as space activities increase, the number of space objects increase, the need for protecting oneself, keeping track of objects, all of this becomes issues for working in the space domain. And other thing that has been happening in the area of space is, see, it has been found that in celestial objects of asteroids or moon or other planetary bodies, there could be a huge opportunity for identifying very rare materials, and these materials could form part of our exploration and mining activities. And what some of the companies, some of the countries are doing today, they are actually, though the country itself does not have any space program, they are bringing in laws by which they are enabling companies to actually, or they are giving license to the companies to go out to deep space, mine asteroids, and bring back objects. So this is one of the things that is going on. And if you look at in terms of value of the asteroid materials, there is a huge number of very important material, which if the cost of access to space and the economics of reaching the asteroid or outer space becomes viable, then mining in space also becomes an activity which will be pursued. And this is where the private enterprise and the public enterprise comes into picture. And more and more private entities are getting into the space arena and space domain. And then look at, for example, if you look at the asteroid things that NASA has launched a space probe, what's called OSIRIS, and then there are huge financial and technological hurdles to overcome this. But then once these hurdles are overcome, as the technological capabilities improve, and this technological capability improvement has to be done through the next generation space players, where the both the entrepreneurs and the startups are the ones who are going to make an impact in this area. And then mining of celestial bodies candidates are for Earth asteroids or Moon and also Mars and other planetary objects. Then there are more than 2 million asteroids, 12,000 asteroids come close to Earth each year. And then some mass of these precious materials are valued by more than $5 trillion. And this is the image source, etc., is from NASA. This is just to give you an indication what kind of things are possible. And also, one of the Japanese attempts on Hayabusa was to touch down on one of the small asteroids and then demonstrate the technological capabilities. Space tourism is another place where for the traveler himself, no scientific qualification may be needed. He needs to undergo certain fitness tests and then training ahead of the flight. And a large number of companies are entering into this space, whether it's Virgin Galactic, SpaceX, or the Blue Origin. They're all founded by the Richard Branson or the Jeff Bezos. SpaceX is Elon Musk, who is also the Tesla electric company, electric car manufacturing company person. Space tourism is again going on a strong footing with more and more companies. Today, there are companies which are providing, for example, through the parabolic flight operations, few people can experience for few tens of seconds the feeling of zero gravity, and for that things are going on. And similarly, by carrying them, few of the multimillionaires have traveled to space courtesy Russia. And then in future, space tourism can become accessible to people who can afford probably in the range of $10 to $100,000, etc. Then space colony. This is a natural evolution, as the probably you would have heard somebody climbing Everest. When he was asked, why do you want to climb Everest? He simply said, I want to climb because it is there. In the same manner, human beings think, I want to reach moon because it is there. I can see Mars, so I want to be there. In the same manner, in future, how to colonize, how to develop habitats which can enable people to live or survive in places other than planet Earth. These are the things that is possible using the space program. And then another thing is, as the population on Earth increases and the energy requirements becomes more and more, one of the possible sources of renewable energy is sun. And if you can make use of the solar energy in outer space, because on Earth, you can imagine, because of our Earth rotation and also the atmosphere, the amount of sunlight that is available at any given point on Earth is less than 24/7 in terms of time and 100%. But if you go to space, you can make use of all the sunlight available by pointing towards sun. And if you build gadgets and if economics of doing things become viable, then energy can be generated from space, and this energy can be transported back to Earth through different mechanisms. In all these areas, today research work is going on, and this is where also there is a tremendous potential for future in terms of students and other people. Now, for example, a Pittsburgh company has secured a contract for putting a rover rocket launch to moon. OneWeb, then we talked about private lunar landers, and then Elon Musk and etc. They have already launched their rocket. Now, even within the India, a number of startups and other entities, there are more than about 15 to 16 companies which are already looking at, and a number of startups are there who are looking at. Companies are trying to build rockets, they're trying to build satellites, and also put into application. In fact, ISRO has also given a contract to one of the companies. These are just names of some of the companies, some of the startups which are there. ISRO has given a contract to Bellatrix for working on microwave thermal thrusters, where in this technology, ISRO itself is not working, but it is getting the work activity done through this agency. As you can see that India over a period of last few decades has been able to generate an end-to-end capability of building rockets, building satellites, building instruments, and using all this provide to the country a capability to look at Earth in different electromagnetic radiation, both for communication, navigation, as well as for surveillance, and a host of other activities. Not only that, we've also been able to look at from space, looking into space, and then monitoring celestial objects. And as a result of that, we are among the few countries in the world which have a space capability. And today, what the government is trying to do is how we can take advantage of this space technology developed in the country. And as I pointed out to you, that there is a huge market in the globe for the space, both for space rockets, satellites, application systems, services being provided. And as the things unfold, get into the future activities, there is a huge potential. Now, how to make this huge potential accessible to people in the country, both in the industry, academia, and how to involve more and more of this community and enable them to capture a portion of the global space market and thereby benefit the country. So this is the thinking, and based on this, the government is trying to bring in more favorable laws and policies to enable the entrepreneurs and make their ability to perform in the arena of space a feasible thing. So it is the work in progress. The activities have just started. So the potential is immense, and depending on how well the youth takes to this, works on the challenges that exist. Challenges are huge because today, if you look at in terms of the chemical, the propulsion systems on which we are operating, the cost of access is quite huge. And also, if you have to operate for a long period in space, if you do have to interplanetary travel, then you also have to carry huge amount of this propulsion material, which will be limiting. So that is where you need to work on different kinds of propulsion system, reduce the cost of access to space so that the space can be used for a large number of activities which benefit us on the planet Earth, for making sure that the survival on planet Earth can be guaranteed or assured, and also looking at space as an opportunity. So this is the way things are progressing. Today, opportunities are quite large and also challenges are there. It's only when, and again, another thing is space is not for the faint-hearted. Risks are huge. And then in spite of those risks, when if you are ready to face the multiple failures that could occur in your efforts, it will be possible for you to take the advantage of the tremendous opportunity that is going to come up, and then make India one of the leading countries in the coming decades and in the coming century. So this in a nutshell is what I thought I can apprise you of, how things are moved, what is happening, and I'm available for any questions that you have. I'll try and answer to the best of my ability. Thank you very much for giving me an opportunity to expose to you what is face challenges, and then what India has done in this area, and how India is planning to move ahead in this arena. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you so much for your wonderful address. We have been getting a lot of questions from the participants. So let me take this opportunity. Am I audible, sir?
Yeah, please go ahead.
Yeah, thank you so much, sir. Sir, you have highlighted and elaborated the versatility of NAVIC, because NAVIC is a technological breakthrough for India. So, for the audience, let me tell them, NAVIC is a navigation service developed in India for India by the Indian Space Research Organization. And we are all aware of GPS. And GPS gives you accuracy of around say 20 meter, but NAVIC gives you accuracy of 5 to 10 meter. And recently, right from Xiaomi to several mobile manufacturers have agreed to have this, and they have even started with consultation with Qualcomm. So my question for AS Kiran Kumar sir is, how we can use this technology through satellite for easy traffic flow or traffic control in India, because we have a lot of problem in traffic. Over to you, sir.
Today, NAVIC enables you by providing a set of about 7 geostationary or geosynchronous satellites. We are beaming signals from these satellites, and small gadgets, handheld gadgets, by collecting this signal, you can locate yourself in terms of latitude and longitude and height. And one of these feature is what is used in that Fisherman's app, what I talked to you, where a small gadget which receives signal from the satellite. And also NAVIC has a unique messaging application wherein specific information about the fishing is also transmitted through this NAVIC messaging system and received in this small gadget which is battery operated. And today there are companies which have brought out, Skytrack for example has brought out a small chip which along with the small antennas can actually does all the receiving of these NAVIC signals and provides you in a common format the information which could be used in apps in the mobiles, and you can convert it into specific position in terms of latitude, longitude. And like you pointed out, today already some of the mobile companies have capability to receive these NAVIC signals. And by virtue of both this NAVIC and Gagan, today DGCA has actually certified a set of signals, GPS-based signals, and in future, NAVIC-based systems also is going to be certified by DGCA for operation. But then how it can be used and how it is being used, just to give you an example, one of the very innovative usages which a company has brought into practice. In Mangalore, one company, they have fitted a small gadget into an auto rickshaw, and by virtue of this, it keeps track of where all the auto went during the day. And at the end of the month, by actually analyzing the entire period of the rickshaws presence in various locations in Mangalore streets, it generates a rating for the auto rickshaw in terms like TRP ratings. And based on that rating, the auto rickshaw driver gets additional money because the rickshaw carries a holding, and by finding out how much of time that holding was present in commercially important areas, which is being tracked through the, you can say, the position-based devices. And then on that basis, the rickshaw fellow gets additional between 3,000 to 5,000 rupees. And the advertiser is also assured that whatever advertisement he has asked him to carry is actually present in commercially viable areas. So the applications are huge, opportunities are huge. And then if these devices are put into the buses or any mobile thing, today more and more government agencies are making it mandatory for tracking vehicles and for while they are in on the road or even when they are in the ocean, etc. So the opportunities are huge. And like I said, this Skytrack device is a small, about 15 millimeter by 15 millimeter assembled system, which can be used in any gadget which you want to design. You can make the both mobile apps with that, or you can devise specific application gadgets using that, and it's possible. And these are areas in which one can make use of the Navic for various applications.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you so much for your answer. Now, since we have audience and we have received more than, because I forget to tell you that we have received more than 1200 registrations for the webinar, and most of them are able to join us. So, and most of them are looking to contribute for Indian Space Research Organization. So I would ask broad question: what are the opportunities and how Young India can contribute for Indian Space Research Organization?
Yeah, like I pointed out, see, this is a huge opportunity in that sense. And so what can be done is actually, just 1 second.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Yeah, today what is being done is ISRO is trying to engage with academic institutions and student community by providing opportunities through various mechanisms and involve them in the activity. But more than that, each of the centers have the sort of internship opportunities, and each of the centers also puts on the web what is the area of their research interest. And in these research interests, based on a selection process, the centers select students who can participate in the activities of both solving some specific problems which are of interest to the organization. And today, a number of centers are being established across India, and both in terms of incubation centers and then research centers. And in those places, actually, if you look at the ISRO website, many of these information is available for knowledge. And academic institutions, based on selection process, academic partners are being selected in selected areas of interest. And in those areas, these academic institutions become not only for R&D, but they also actually will be able to look at what developments are happening globally and provide specific information to the people working within the organization, update their database, update their knowledge base. So for this also, we are trying to involve academic institutions. But only thing what we have to realize is the number of the students who can be accommodated in these programs are limited, because ISRO as an organization itself has across the various centers maybe about 15,000 to 16,000 staff. And then since they're heavily loaded with work, the ability to engage with the student community has its limitation. But notwithstanding this, the effort is to make more and more interaction with the student community and then enable them.
Thank you so much, sir. And if you could see, there is a lot of buzz regarding privatization of space industry. So even most of them are interested to know the future of space startups and how they can work with ISRO. Over to you, sir.
Yeah, future for startups, etc. Today, what the government is trying to do is, like I was saying, how the capability that has been developed in the ISRO can be shared, and how some of the facilities that are available in ISRO can be made accessible to these startups for conducting certain tests and for enabling them to make progress in their field. And in this context, the government is trying to bring in new mechanisms, and through these like I said, it's a work in progress, and very soon the more and more details will be coming out into the open. How many of the testing facilities that have been established in the ISRO centers can be made accessible to startups for conducting their developmental activities, and how the ISRO is also trying to bring in through challenges. Probably you would have seen even in that human space program as an opportunity, the challenges were thrown open to the enterprise in the country. In the same way, more and more requirements of the organization, both in terms of future developmental requirements and also some of the things which we are currently doing, will be thrown open as opportunity challenges. And these opportunity challenges, depending on the proposals received from the enterprises, they'll be evaluated, and based on such evaluation, selection will happen, and those selected entities can contribute to the requirements. So these mechanisms are all being worked out at this point in time, and soon you will be hearing more and more about these things.
Thank you so much, sir. Most of them are also requesting for career opportunities and other things. So sir has rightly mentioned, you have to follow Indian Space Research Organization website so that you could be updated with yourself. And one more question I would like to ask, sir. Can you throw some light on Mission Gaganyaan so that they will understand?
Okay, see, the mission Gaganyaan started with the basic idea of what the Honorable Prime Minister had set a target earlier, that before the 75th anniversary of our independence, India should be able to carry its own Gagannauts into space and bring them back safely. So what it involves is, as you can visualize, carrying humans into space, orbiting them around Earth, and then bring them back. That means this requires a module which can be brought back from orbiting in space. And when you bring back an object from space back to Earth, you can also visualize that the objects which are traveling at very high Mach numbers, 25, 26 kind of Mach numbers, then when they enter through the atmosphere, there'll be a huge friction. And as a result of this, there'll also be huge temperature increases. So the objects inside this capsule and also the human beings inside this capsule, you have to ensure that they can survive a temperature regime which is quite benign. And if you have to make sure that this module is able to survive, it has to ensure that you develop special materials which will be able to support large temperature gradients across the tile itself. So towards this, India had conducted its first space capsule recovery experiment way back in 2007. And also in 2014, we did the crew module re-entry experiment. And also last year, there was pad abort test. That means you are trying to bring in capability of the capsules and then environmentally controlled capsule operation, bringing these capsules back to Earth from space, and also human rating the launch vehicle. Launch vehicle itself, when it has to operate for non-human beings or non-living things, the risks can be taken. But then when human beings or life has to go in the vehicle, the human rating becomes an important thing. And all the designs have to be improved to such an extent that you have margins in all the variable conditions that one encounters during space travel or reaching to space, and then making sure that you have enough redundancies in the system. So Gaganyaan program was basically with a target of carrying humans from Gagannauts from India to space and bring them back safely. And then towards this, a few of the astronauts selected are also undergoing training in Russia today, because initially all these training facilities could be quite costly. So by the time we establish that also, it takes time. So India is making use of Russia's facilities available for training. But gradually all these training facilities also will be established in the country. And as the resources become more and more available, our ability to make this Gaganyaan program a full-fledged human space flight center has been established. And this is working towards making a launch vehicle, our polar means geostationary satellite launch vehicle, human rated, and then carry out couple of launches prior to manned launch, and ensuring that everything is fine is in the works today, and work is in progress.
Thank you, sir. You have, during your presentation, you have deliberately explained about the future projects of ISRO. But is there any one project, huge project, I could say, and there are ample opportunities, career opportunities for our future engineers? So would you like to throw how they shall start preparing for the same?
Actually, if you look at ISRO's job requirements, you have in ISRO people from all disciplines, from you can say material science to chemical engineering, electronics engineering, information science, biologists, zoologists, or even psychologists, arts. So it's a huge opportunity. All aspects of life are covered, and particularly as humans in space demands life presence in outer space, the scope of the activity is quite large, and all disciplines are involved. So what is required in whatever discipline you have taken, you need to be ex excelling in that, and you need to develop capability, increase your proficiency in that, and then based on the opportunities made available by the organization through its advertisements over a period of time, the specific interviews and then selection processes will happen. But in terms of disciplines, all disciplines the ISRO takes, like I said, for example, fishermen, identifying even the fish, what kind of fish is available, or agricultural scientists. So there's a host of opportunity from all disciplines of science, and even in terms of life sciences. So there is no one discipline which is preferred. And every year, and we of course we need to realize that probably the number of intake on a yearly basis will be between 200 to 250. But in the recent past, certain increased intake is going on, and today a larger intake is currently in progress. And for this, advertisements have been put in place, and people can actually apply through that and then make themselves available for selection process.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you so much for your motivation. There is one interesting question from one of the participants. If due to some reason satellite space debris fell on the earth, would it affect the nature?
Okay, now today the kind of satellites that we are talking about can be weighing anything from, if you talk of picosatellites, nanosatellites, etc. They are extremely small, even microsatellites. By the time they enter the Earth's atmosphere, most of it will burn out. So what will remain and reach Earth will depend on the size of the satellite itself. If it is a huge satellite to start with, tons in weight, then there is a possibility of some of the satellite part, or even the spent rocket stages coming back through the atmosphere. And this was the scare sometime back. One of the space station segments was looked at. And also, since the ocean is a huge part of Earth, the probability that these objects fall on land is to that extent less. But notwithstanding that, it is quite possible at some time in future that some of these space objects could enter and then even impact the Earth wherever it hits. Now, depending on the sizes, etc., its impact will depend. And otherwise, today, the largest object that are operating in space will be like space station, and then those space station objects also, when we totally lose control of them, could result in gradually their orbit decaying and then entering the atmosphere. But otherwise, most of the low Earth orbiting satellites will be there for few years, few tens of years, and then they will enter the atmosphere and burn out. Much higher altitude objects will stay for many hundreds of years, in fact, and their impact will be assessed based on the tracking mechanism and also the space situational awareness systems which are being built by advanced countries, and also more and more coordinated effort is going on between countries to keep track of all objects that are orbiting in space. So it's a continuous process, a process. As you keep improving your capabilities, you are solving one problem, creating a new problem, another challenge to solve that problem. So this is also today a number of academic institutions and entrepreneurs are trying to build scavenging systems or even systems which can go into orbit, repair satellites or capture satellites and then bring them back. So even how to provide such a service, there are companies which are working on such possibilities. So it's an opportunity for research for some. And like I said, every solution probably brings a new problem, and that new problem brings another opportunity.
Sir,
Thank you, sir.
sir, I have a small query.
Go ahead.
Yeah, sir, do we have opportunity in the ISRO, on a sabbatical leave, can faculty come there?
Okay, today the specific opportunity like what you are saying, a faculty can come and work in ISRO, probably to the best of my knowledge, there is no specific mechanism available. But
Okay.
again, this is in the work where the people like what you are saying could come and participate in specific projects. Probably this will be one of the things that we have a capacity building program office, which is looking at how the student means people who are working in ISRO can actually improve their credentials, improve their capability by doing PhD or research in academic institutions is happening. And in the same way, actually there is one Indian National Academy of Engineering, which is providing opportunity for selected students to work in laboratories of ISRO. And those opportunities, there is a professor whom they identify for co-host. So maybe there is one mechanism where there is a collaborative effort possible between the professor and a student working with a specific entity in ISRO and conducting some research activity. Probably this also we will look at in capacity building program office activities to see how this particular idea can be taken forward.
Thank you so much, sir. We look forward for having such opportunities for our students and faculty there. Thank you.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you so much. Now, as everyone is aware, now because of this COVID emergency and pandemic effect, the era has been divided like before COVID, during COVID, and after COVID. So my question is, what interdisciplinary skills the student should acquire during their engineer for successful career? Because of this COVID, what kind of opportunities are awaiting for them? Over to you, sir.
Okay. COVID or no COVID, today what is happening is progressively we are seeing that unless an individual is actually able to comprehend what is happening in many different disciplines, his ability to contribute and succeed in the professional domain becomes limited. And that is where what is called as, you can say, T of knowledge. That means you become very proficient in one area. So you go deep in that, but at the same time, you have a horizontal expansion. That means you have working knowledge in many other disciplines. That is the horizontal range of T, and a deep knowledge in one domain and working knowledge in many other domains becomes essential. And also the students have to realize that the ability to learn, unlearn what is not needed and learn new things is a key process capability they should develop during their courses, during their stay in the academic institutions. And it's only when we ensure that we retain our ability to keep learning, that we can succeed in whatever we want to do in the future. So what COVID has actually done is it has in a way reset our entire thinking process. What we were earlier pre-COVID days, the way the world was moving, it was moving in a particular, you can say, speed. Suddenly, people are made to realize that many things which is going at hectic pace may not be really required for us to survive and for us to work or for us to live. And then it has sort of reset our thinking process and has made certain aspects of life very clearly aware. And post COVID, probably the social distancing and the more less and less physical interaction also becomes an essential thing. And if this has to be done, more and more virtual activities become probably of importance. But then the physical realization of objects will continue to be required, and towards that the efforts have to be there. So primarily what I would say is a student should try and look at how he can keep learning as he progresses, and then extend his ability by learning deeply in one domain and then keeping his working knowledge in many other domains as an essential thing.
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much. Now, I would like to request Professor Dr. Sunil Dingre, sir, to ask few questions on behalf of them.
Hello, sir.
Yeah.
Sir, what is the future of private agencies in this space activities?
Yeah, like we're saying, one of the thing is space business is a very risky business. It calls for, you can say, not for the faint-hearted, and it calls for being ready to face failures, difficulties. But then if you are ready for that, and then if you take of course, in general, it is only in those areas where you take higher risk, you can get higher returns. And it's only in that mode it happens. And space being the fourth and the final frontier, it is in a way, you can say, the future. Because as you have seen, the humanity over in the past has looked at how it can conquer land, ocean, airspace, and then similarly the fourth frontier, or the ultimate frontier, space. So there is going to be tremendous activities which will go on, and it is those who are able to bring in newer innovative capabilities and then make things happen in these areas in a more cost effective and economic way that they will succeed. And they should be prepared for taking higher and higher risks. And then once you take that kind of ready for that, then probably you can succeed and then go ahead. And India, as we have said, the effort both in terms of the government and also ISRO as an agency is to enable the country to take advantage of this space economy which is today talked about in $500 billion, and probably in future it is going to go into even $1 trillion range. And if the enterprise has to become a part of this, then they should start making use of these opportunities and then move ahead.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you so much.
Sir, one more question. Sir, one more question.
Yeah.
Sir, generally, what sort of ground testings are done for space missions?
Okay. See, if you look at, if you have to put an object into space, what is required? This object in space, depending on what kind of orbit you are putting or what kind of position in space it is there, the environment it faces is hard vacuum. And then by virtue of the energy it receives from sun, it gets heated up. And also depending on how much energy you are dissipating in the object itself, the temperature excursion seen on the satellite or the object moving in space, it gets determined. So you have to be designing the system for operating in extreme temperature environment, then hard vacuum, and then as the object is taken from ground to space, it goes through the launch vibration and then acoustic noise, and you have to subject the systems through these vibration, acoustic test, thermal vacuum test, and temperature test. And beyond this radiation environment, survivability of these objects and systems in the presence of particle radiation and the also thermal radiation, it is going to be it's tested. So what we do for satellites is, after we realize the hardware, we go through what is called a qualification. That means if we anticipate a certain limit of encountering the vibration level in terms of G levels or random accelerations or temperature excursions, suppose we expect the satellite objects to go between -100 to +100. We test those subsystems for -120 to +120. That means, and then if you expect it to go through 100 cycles during its life, you test it for 150 cycles. If you expect it to go through 1000 cycles, you do more than that and verify. So like this, and put them in thermal vacuum chamber and test them. So basically, you determine what kind of environment the system is going to encounter during its life when it leaves the Earth to space, and then make sure that you simulate all those conditions on ground and test for survivability and functionality.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you so much. Sir, one last question proceeding towards conclusion. So let me take one question before that. Sir, as we know, MIT Boston helped NASA designing computer system and software to control Apollo 11 spacecraft. And since then, MIT Boston has been providing assistance to NASA for every project. So my question would be, is ISRO considering any help from researchers from different educational institutes across India, say for Gaganyaan or for any future projects, so that we can also contribute being educational institutions?
Okay. See, today what is happening, some of the areas where academic institutions are participating and academic research community. See, we have some centers, technology centers, which were established in all the IITs earlier, Indian Institute of Science, and then now some National Institute of Technology, NITs, are also involved. And progressively, like I pointed out earlier, about 18 different discipline areas, academic partnership mechanism has been initiated, and these have been made on open advertisement. Applications are solicited, and in these specific areas of interest, based on the capabilities of these academic institutions, a selection is being done, and based on that selection, that particular academic institution will help ISRO in increasing its knowledge base in that discipline. It could be artificial intelligence, deep learning, or it could be propulsion system, or it could be computations, etc., like algorithm development, or it could be in life sciences, many of these. So this is one mechanism which has been brought out. And apart from that, under RESPOND program, we do give opportunities for academic institutions to conduct research in areas of interest. So all this is continuously going on, and further increase is being attempted, and making use of these announcement of opportunities, academic institutions should participate and become eligible for selection. Then they will be involved in these activities.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. One interesting question from one of the participants, student participant. Sir, after putting all the hard work and endeavors, how does it feel to stand in control room and to watch the successful launch for any project?
Okay, so it's like you can say like an expectant parent. So you are waiting for the delivery, and you are waiting for what is going to see. You have put in all the work, you have done everything that you can, envisioned all the environment that will come. But then when the actual event is going to happen, at that time, it's one of expectancy, and then how it is going to perform, whether it's going to do the activities the way you have designed, or are you likely to encounter any difficulties. Those are the thought processes that keeps going on at that time. And for launch particularly, though you have done 100 launches, 101st launch is again one of such expectancy, whether everything is going to go right, and then how it will perform on that particular mission is a question mark. And so you have to keep waiting for the events to unfurl and then roll out. So it's the same thing when, for example, the satellite got inserted into the Mars orbit, or in the final stages of descent of the Chandrayaan 2 lander, when it encountered a problem and it could not handle the situation it was in. So these are actually, it's, you can say, an expectant person, where you have done all you can and you are waiting for the events to unfold. So that kind of expectancy is there. And like I said, these are not for the faint hearted. So you have to be prepared for the worst case scenarios and carry on. Each experience teaches you something new. It teaches you what was not happening correctly and how that correction can be incorporated in the future operations.
Thank you, sir.
Quick
And
answer,
let
sir.
me also thank to you because you always extend your mentor and your guidance to all our students at MIT School of Engineering and faculty members, how they can take up ahead with. And to conclude, last question what I would like to ask, because we do have participants from students community, we do have faculty members, even we have some industry representatives, those who are working in space industry. So what one message would you like to give all of them that they should do?
Yeah, one message is, like I'm saying, space is a frontier ready, waiting to be conquered by human beings. And it's a huge opportunity. And this opportunity, it's only when you look beyond what is today available and how to improve our capabilities in each of the areas of interest, whether it is improving our ability to reach to space, building better vehicles, and then for surviving in space, and then making sure that the economics of doing all this becomes more and more cost effective. That is when actually we can take advantage of the opportunities that is there. It's only when you start looking at how you can do what is being done in a totally new manner and in a manner which others have not attempted, and then you can go ahead of others and achieve success. So keep looking out for doing things in a novel manner and ahead of others. Then you can bring not only a capability to the country, a capability to humanity in general, so that we can ensure surviving on this planet becomes assured, but also you can go out of this planet and maybe survive there.
Thank you so much, sir, for your enlightening words and motivational guidance. So now let me ask Professor Dr. Sunil Dingre, sir, Head Department of Aerospace Engineering, to propose vote of thanks.
Thank you, Professor Suraj. Good afternoon, everybody. We have to wind up this interesting session only because of time limitation. On behalf of Aerospace Engineering Department, MIT School of Engineering, MIT ADT University, Pune, I would like to take this opportunity to thank Padma Shri A.S. Kiran Kumar sir for blessing us with his precious presence and taking out valuable time from his busy schedule to enlighten us. It's always been our pleasure to listen to you, sir, and we look forward to see you again for upcoming events also. We are also thankful to you for your guidance and constructive suggestions for development of our laboratories. Thank you, sir, for exploring the new era of space activity in terms of tourism, travel, adventure. We are all Indians, we are proud of ISRO and the prediction capability of super cyclones, which has reduced the risk. So thank you very much, sir.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
I would like to thank our Honorable Executive President, Dr. Mangesh Karad sir, for his encouragement and motivation. I also thank Principal Dr. Kishore Rawande for his enthusiastic support and all staff of MIT Edit University for their contribution in organizing this webinar. Last but not least, my heartfelt thanks to all our dear audience for active participation in this webinar. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Bye.
Thank you so much, A.S. Kiran Kumar sir. Thank you so much. Jai Hind sir. Jai Hind.